Political analyst, Professor Sipho Seepe. Prof, thank you so much for joining us. Now, was the cabinet reshuffle necessary?
Well, the number of things that happened last week, and it's worth repeating them. First was the issue of the Oak Bay. You had the company that was in court.
Yes.
And I think, fortunately, in this country, we have transparency. You saw the judges being very unimpressed with the Minister of Finance with regard to the financial intelligence certificate. They were asking, why are you bringing this, because it has no bearing to the case. But when you look at that financial information certificate, it almost suggested that there were transactions, about 72 of them, that were suspicious. But when the court looked at that, they found that there's nothing here. So it was almost like a minister had taken a personal interest in this company, and it was almost like a personal vendetta. So that was the first thing. Then you had the Ahmed Katara funeral. At that funeral, the president was reduced to almost a villain, and everybody else was a hero. But I think for me, the last straw was when the SABC almost dared the president, almost suggesting that you have no power to do this. And acted, I'm not buying this so-called intelligence report that came, but I think the president had exercised what most of us were saying it's likely to happen, because there was this tension. Even the rating agencies, as they acted, they've been complaining about the tensions that existed. So that does not, we should not pretend that all was well between the two of them. But I think Pravin himself confirmed that as soon as he was fired, he was out there mobilizing against the president. So it shows the gulf between the two of them. But what I also found sad, but also indicative of the problems between them, is when Pravin said he didn't even receive a courtesy call. He only heard it from the media. But that shows the depth of this distrust between the two of them.
Now, just you've taken us through the background of what happened a few days before the cabinet reshuffle up until today. Now, let's speak about the different voices that are now coming from the ANC, in particular, concerning President Zuma's decision of the cabinet reshuffle. There's a lot of, mixed reaction from within the party itself and the executive itself.
Yeah, well, if you listen to the members, they have, including Gwede Mantashe,
yes, including
Cyril Maposa, their concern and their unhappiness is around consultation. And there's a different point of view within the ANC around that matter. What Gwede and Cyril said, that we were consulted only on Pravin. We were not consulted about the rest. But by then, certain things had already happened. You had the president who had gone to the SABC and thought he was having a confidential discussion. And that discussion was then broadcast by SABC. So he felt probably, I'm thinking for him, that he felt that it may not be necessary. But also because of the position that was taken by Cyril, which was very clear. When you have your colleague saying, I disagree with you, and I'm going to go public to tell you that I disagree with you. You can't be working with somebody well like that. And fortunately, he told us what he told the president, and he also promised the president that I will tell the public. So you could see that the tensions between the three of them is something that they have to manage. But it's also damning of leadership that they should be washing the dirty linen in public. They are the ones who are supposed to guide the rest members of the ANC, because the disagreements within the ANC are what defines the ANC. The ANC manages contradictions. The contradictions are there.
Now, can we say the ANC is still a united voice, especially after everything that's been aired out, as you say, the dirty linen aired out in the public domain? Still a united voice, or is this the only contentious issue, or are there other underlying issues?
Well, some of us have always argued that the ANC has always been a home of contradictions. What it means that the disagreements exist within the ANC as a matter of course, but it is the management of those disagreements. And in a sense, it is good for a party to have multiplicity of perspectives because it strengthens it. But when people become married to the ideas, that's when you have factionalism coming in. And now the ANC sees that this multiplicity is also becoming a challenge. But in terms of being united around where they're going, one could say they don't quibble about that. But it's how you go there. But the most important thing is really the dynamics of power, which tends to corrupt individuals. I mean, there are behaviors that people are not associated with, like grandstanding, opportunism, and now that we're going towards elections, as one of the people from KwaZulu-Natal was saying, that we're going to see these alien tendencies beginning to get more pronounced.
Now, just going back to what you mentioned earlier, the fact that, and we've seen it as well in the public domain, that Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa has come out against the decision that was taken by the President, and the Secretary General, Gwede Mantashe, has also done the same thing. Does this indicate tensions between the three of them on just this issue, or, you know, are there other issues taking place behind the scenes that have not come out into the public space where we're able to see it? Is it all being contained internally, and are we likely to see more outbreaks coming
I don't know. I think it will be an element of ill discipline if they do that, but they will not be sending a proper message to their members. And but what is very clear is also what you are asking was also confirmed by Jesse Duarte, that in the ANC there are robust debates, there are disagreements. So we should not see this as one case in point, but we should also look at it within the context of the excitement that is also taking place.
Now, just speaking of that excitement, and you mentioned earlier, and we saw it as well last week, that the SACP then came out and let the cat out of the bag, you know, prematurely. What does this mean for the alliance partnership? Well, any indications?
Well, I mean, the SACP has always threatened to want to leave the alliance. And there are members within the ANC who are actually saying, we wish you goodbye, so that you can stand on your own and pursue this agenda that you have. Because you can't, at every instance where there are disagreements, you threaten divorce. It's almost like it's acting like an abused wife, but still comes back. So I think that behavior might be one of those that adds to that divorce proceedings taking place soon.
Now, do we see President Zuma surviving this and staying on as president, as continued calls? We've seen in our earlier reports that there's continued calls from the opposition parties saying that they're going to have a march calling for the president to resign or to step down. Is he going to continue in his position as president?
The fate of the president does not lie with the opposition parties. It lies with the ANC. If the ANC gets to a stage where it says we are no longer happy with this president, they're going to bid him goodbye. Remember, this is not the first time that they've done it. I mean, some of us had called for the step that the former president must step down, and during that time, people were dying because of the HIV pandemic. But the ANC stuck until it got to a stage where they felt that the president is no longer even listening to the ANC. But ultimately, it was numbers that ultimately, you see, when you go to war, you also make sure that you have the numbers on your side. So the members of the ANC, if they want to get rid of the President Zuma, they also need to do their calculation. And at the moment, I don't see the numbers more on their side. I see provinces now coming, and also some people saying, yes, you can disagree, we are not happy with the decision taken, but there is a manner in which we expect leadership to behave. So that would be a matter that Zizo was saying, that publicly, to say these leaders must explain themselves to the members of the ANC. How do they act in that fashion? Because disagreements is what defines the ANC.
Now, just bearing that in mind, is there any action that can be taken against President Jacob Zuma with regards to the decision of the cabinet reshuffle outside of the African National Congress, for instance, by the Integrity Commission?
Well, I mean, these commissions are set up by the ANC, but I don't think they have the powers to remove the president. If one were to look back at history, when the president was removed, there was a special meeting of the NEC, of the ANC, to take that decision. So I don't think we're at that stage yet. But what we will see is also, we've seen a response from KwaZulu-Natal. We've seen the Women's League making a response. We've seen the Youth League making a response. We saw the MKVA making a response, and they are not in alignment to that moment where they might actually say, Mr. President, we wish you good luck and goodbye.
The EFF has filed an application at the with the Concord for impeachment proceedings against President Jacob Zuma. Can the court make any decision with regards to this in terms of taking this forward?
Well, I think the court would not take much time dealing with that matter. The Chief Justice has already expressed himself on the matter. He had said, on the matter that involves Nkandla, he said all that needed to be done. And he's also fully aware that the court cannot overreach itself. It understands that there are three branches of the state, and one must not be encroaching in the other sphere. And the Constitution is also very clear that ultimately it is up to the Parliament. This is why the DA has rushed to Parliament again, and also suggesting that they'll be approaching individual members of the ANC who are disgruntled with the president. So ultimately, depending on the numbers that are there, they can carry this motion through. They failed a number of times, but you never know about the future. But at least what we know, any political decision, political statement that is taken also has consequences. The president's decision to fire has political consequences, and the right of members of the ANC leadership to speak publicly will also have consequences, but we don't know what that will be. But what was very clear is that the opposition parties has been emboldened by the action of the leadership of the ANC to say now it's the time to strike, and we strike once and we succeed.
Now, just speaking of the opposition and how they seem to have gained power or seen that there's an opportunity, that there's a possibility things may go their way without really knowing much. Now, the vote of no confidence that's being motioned or tabled for Parliament or being called for by opposition parties, are we likely to see a secret vote taking place for MPs?
No. I think the Speaker of Parliament was very clear that we're not going to change rules because of our hatred for a certain person. What we need to do is that actually, I don't even understand why there should be a vote that is secret. If you are convinced of your position, you should be able to take a stand for it. I mean, people went to jail. I don't understand why it becomes very difficult for them. Now they want to go Nicodemus around voting. I think we should not encourage that behavior. We should actually say people must have the courage of their conviction, and they must take a public position, and they should say, I'm doing this for the country, and whether I'm going to lose a swimming pool or I'm going to lose a job, should not my country first, not my comfort.
Now, Prof, before we let you go, if you were to advise President Jacob Zuma on the latest developments in the country, the current downgrade that we're going through with junk status, we're expecting Moody's to make a credit rating on Friday, what would you say to him if you had his ear for 5 minutes? In that 5 minutes, what would you say to the president?
We have always said to the president, one of the things that you need, I mean, not that I've said it to him directly, but I've said this to members of the ANC, that they need to start having think tanks, but they should also have black think tanks. What we have in this country are mainly white think tanks, and those, when they come out always in the interest of white interests. So we need to start talking about, Mr. President, if you have think tanks, then you have people who are going to provide a second or third opinion. You don't have to take it, but it will seem that that idea has not cemented within the members of the ANC. But most importantly, the president has always argued, and the ANC argues, that when they take decisions, it's always collective. So if one were to succeed in that, it is not only about convincing one person, it's about making sure that the entirety of the ANC must also understand that black people can also think and can also provide advice.
Prof, thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to leave it there for now. That was Professor Sipho Seepe joining us live in studio. Time now for a quick